What up, dogs? Welcome to another Patreon exclusive tutorial here today. Today I'm going to be painting up two Shadowsword super heavy tanks for Legions Imperialis by Games Workshop. Massive thank you to those guys for sending these out to me to paint up as previews. Really wicked time doing these. As soon as I knew Shadowswords were coming, I knew I needed some. I love the idea of a Titan Hunter Shadowsword company blasting massive volcano cannon rays across the battlefield, making Warlord Titans go super nuclear super quick. So I really couldn't wait to paint these. I painted them up to match the scheme of my Solar Auxilia, which is very urban camouflage, greys and creams, to really give across that urban fighting aesthetic, which I can't wait to do across the whole army. The only thing that's not painted is the tank commander, because I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do my inventory yet, so I'm going to go back to that later and paint him up. This is painted very similar to my 28mm scheme, which I did a video for on my YouTube for my Ethon Heavy Sentinel, so go check that out if you want to see this big styly. First things first, I primed my Shadowswords with Colourforge Matte Black and Colourforge Standard Grey. I don't know why it's come out slightly glossy, which has never happened to me before. Maybe I needed to rattle it a bit more. But otherwise the colour's perfect for what we need. We're then going to start doing some of our camouflage patterns. There we go. We're going to use Proacryl Warm Grey. We're going to drop 3 drops of this into my filthy airbrush. No thinner, no flow improver. Just straight from the pot, and it spits exactly as I need it to. So I'm going to apply my needle depth to be very shallow, because the last thing I want to do is jump and splatter this with this colour. So the closer that chuck is to our needle chuck, the less needle comes through, the less paint goes through. So as you can see, I can get a really nice, neat, thin line with that. Great feature on this Renegade Chrome. So with that, we're going to do some random little naturally inconsistent stripes and camo patterns. I'm a little bit close to the tank than I'd like to be because I'm filming, so normally I'd be a little bit further away. The only thing to be aware of is the paint will dry in the nozzle because of how little of the needle is coming out because of the gauge we've got stopping that. So I applied a little bit of flow improver to make sure it's not going to dry too quickly, and we're going to go from there. Following the same premise as I did with the King Tiger I painted last week, is we're going to try and split our colours to be a third across the whole vehicle. So there's 3 colours, the prime Met Grey, this warm grey, and then a bright grey coming up. So we want those to be 33 across the whole tank. So as you can see, I'm just going around blasting on some really nice little shapes. Move on to the second tank now, just to start filling in our camouflage pattern. I'm going to try and make sure there's no synchronization across the two schemes, across the two tanks, because I want them to be inconsistently consistent, if that makes sense. So just dot some nice little lines, not worrying too much about neatness, just ensuring I've got that nice degree of separation across this grey and the first grey, and soon to come the next grey, which is about now. Proacryl's Bright Warm Grey, lovely colour. This is going to be our third and final high tone, and we're going to do exactly what we did before. About a third of the tank's worth of stripes across it. If I get any splatter, I'm going to go over that because I am airbrushing while filming, which is always a good time. And we're going to make sure this goes across our initial grey and our warm grey, because we want these 3 colours to meet, and again, give that really nice, realistic, effective camouflage pattern. Now this seems quite bright, especially compared to the last grey we did, but that's fine. By the time we've hit this with some weathering and some varnish, it's going to look absolutely wicked. I've done this scheme on my Basilisk company and my Baneblade companies, so it's going to come out great on these. And then I just need to decide what I'm doing in my infantry, but I'll worry about that later. It's worth noting I didn't clean out my airbrush between these 2 greys, because you'll get a natural nice blend and consistent kind of transition between the 2 colours. And the less time I spend cleaning, the less wear and tear, the less fannying about, the more I can paint, the quicker I can paint. So as you can see, the jump up for this grey, especially while it's still wet, is quite stark, but it is going to look great by the time we're done, I assure you. So as you'll notice in my Solar Auxilia Heresy scheme, I don't paint the trim, I don't see the point in it. Yes, I know it's aesthetically nice to look at, and it's this whole conveyance of the Solar Auxilia being the elite mortals who fight alongside the Space Marines, but I don't see the point or the time in servitors or whoever paints the vehicles going out of their way to paint the trim. So I'm not going to bother. Again, my tanks, I do what I want. If you want to paint trim, go ham. If you don't, cool man, welcome to the club. Russian Sand, we're going to do some company markings with this. So I like adding company markings to all my vehicles. I like them to be part of a formation or a detachment that they're all linked to. So I'm going to give these a cream bone stripe next to a black stripe, and that will be my Shadowsword company's markings. These models are sculpted really, really nicely in that there's nice clear separation of panels, so you can emulate real world tanks. There's a lot of really nice references across World War I tanks, where you'd had like really nice bold white and red stripes at the front. You can do whatever colours you want, but I'm going to do these like this. And again, you'll see this across all the tanks for my Solar Auxilia, big and small. I want each company to have designated markings so that they know who they belong to, and the Solar Auxilia fighting around them will know who's got their back. Coal black I'm going to use for the black half of the stripe, so again I'm going to do up to that line there, where you see my brush is just alongside, and get them to meet in the middle. And those will be my two colours for my Titan Hunter company. It's a really nice breaking colour against all the grey, and again it's that little real world nod that we like to see. So I'll do this across both tanks and give it plenty of time to dry, and then that's pretty much most of the colours done. So there's the tank company markings down. We're going to leave them to dry, and then when they are dry I'm going to hit this with some gloss varnish, which is this stuff from Pro Acryl. Any brand will do. I'm going to lob it through the airbrush, mixing it 1-to-1 with thinner, and you don't need to drown this in gloss varnish. It doesn't need to be a bright shiny globule tank. We just want to give it a little dusting just to help our enamels do what we need them to do later and to protect our paintwork underneath. So again, light little passes. You'll see it hit the tank when it's wet and just shimmer it slightly. That'll do. We don't want to drown it. We don't want to absolutely soak it in gloss varnish. We just want to dust it. Right, they've had plenty of time to dry, so now I'm going to use this brown blue wash from AK. I've got this Scatiol brush, which I use for enamels. No finesse, no delicacy. I'm just going to put some on my brush and dabble it in random splodges around these tanks. Now, it does look green, not blue-grey, which is weird, but I love this paint. I love what it does for any grey vehicles. I use it on my 28mm Solar Auxilia. I've used it on World War II Panzers. I just love how this looks over a grey tank. So I'm just going to randomly dob this straight out of the pot all around the tank. We're not going to cover it. We don't want to turn the whole thing green. We just want to give this a little bit of accent once we've taken it off with the white spirits and the sponge, just to give that little nice shaded undertone of a green. Maybe where dust and muck settled in between the armour panels, and just make it look that little bit more realistic. Now, when we're painting anything at this scale, we need to consider the scale. So we wouldn't paint these exactly how we would paint our 28mm vehicles. We'd use the same colours, but we wouldn't use the same techniques and the same approach. So with that in mind, we need to think about what we want our brightest colours to be, how much effort we want to put into highlighting, how much weathering we're going to do. So throughout the video, I'll go on to talk about where we focus on the scale and we have that impact our scheme. So we've got our sponge now with some white spirits on it, damp, not sodden. I'm just going to gently brush this over. It does two things. It takes off the concentrated enamel where we dabbed it, and then the spirits causes it to break apart and flow into the recesses of the armour, where our gloss varnish picks that up and sends it on its way. So you can already see it's getting rid of the focus of the greeny blue colour, but it's also spreading it across the whole tank. It's almost like a filter. I'm going to make sure we do this all over the tank, so we get a nice consistent subtle blue, grey, green finish that this enamel is going to do for us. I want to be gentle with the sponge because I don't want to take off any paintwork. We're just going to gently dab. Where it's tricky to get to, you can use an old brush soaked with white spirits just to work it in. Alternatively, you'll see me sometimes press down a little bit firmer, not scraping while I'm doing it, but pressing down, which causes the spirits in the brush to soak further onto the tank and again spread that enamel all over where we want it to go. And you can already see, again, we've lost where that concentrate green was, but it's causing it to flow all around the tank and give it a nice little tint. ensuring we get it into our company markings as well, onto the other tank. Just using old case foam. We don't want to use case foam that's too strict, too dense, because again, that could damage our paintwork and the work we're doing. So any soft, light coarse sponge will be absolutely fine. And again, dabbing where I want to get more spirits under the gun barrel basically, and spreading it around so that it flows and goes across the entire tank. Now, considering the scale, after this step in the 28mm video I did, we'd go into some oil washers with burnt umber and dark sienna. I've not done that because, again, thinking at this scale, that if the tank was that dirty we could see it from this far back and far away, that's a pretty fucking dirty tank. So we're going to skip that step and focus on this enamel being our weathering detail on there. We're not going to do any sponge weathering. Instead, we're going to do some light dry brushing with our bright warm grey. So in the 28mm scale, I would dab this on with a scuff highlight with the edge of the brush just to pick out those details. At this scale, I'm going to do the lightest, and I mean the lightest, tickliest dry brush you've ever seen. We just want to grab those edges and the trim of the armour, and we're just going to pick those bits up to break up the grey. This is going to be our brightest colour on the armour outside of any metallics. So again, we're going to do this across both tanks. There's barely any paint on there. Really gently, subtly and slowly dragging it across those surfaces, ensuring you pick up all those nice sharp details. Now, we could have done this before we applied our varnish on our enamel. However, I think at that point we'd have lost this colour completely. So if we do this before we apply our matte varnish, we'll get a very, very subtle jump up in colour between this highlight and the bright grey warm underneath that we airbrushed on. You could do this after you've matte varnished, but I don't want it to be that stark. So I think in between the enamel and the matte varnish, sealing everything in, is a good place to do this. And again, we'll get that really nice scale fitting highlight from this dry brush with our nice tinted armour with that little green enamel under there. Overall, that's pretty much 99% of these tanks done after that. So as you can see, I'm giving this a really nice little tickle. There's barely any paint on this brush. If you want to add more, but I would simply say it's far easier to add more on than to take it away, so do not overdo it at this step. Up next, I've got this Ultra Matte Lucky Varnish from Ammo. This stuff's brilliant. It is pre-thinned, so I'm just going to, again, similar to what I did with the gloss varnish, give it a really nice light dusting. You'll see it hit the tank and shimmer slightly as the moisture hits it and then start to dry. That's what we want to do. We don't want to douse it so it pools and we get big white puddles in between all the armor panels. We want this to hit and start drying immediately. So light dustings from a good distance, about 6 inches, where it'll dry nice and matte without pooling and leaving horrible white lines. Do this across both tanks, all over. There's nothing worse than getting to this stage and then you go into your metallics and you can see a little bit of gloss shining in between a couple of panels. This stuff's great though, you can apply it with a brush, so if you don't have an airbrush and you're doing it by brush at this stage, which is absolutely fine, you can do it and it'll still look great. You can apply this with a brush exactly where you need it to. I'd probably thin it down with a little bit of water just to save on any possible detail loss, but yeah, this stuff's really, really good. I'm a big fan. There we go, looking handsome. Absolute couple of lads. So they're all matte varnished up. That's pretty much all the work done. We're going to go on to some metallics next. Now again, considering the scale, Pro-Acryl Silver is very, very bright. However, we're going to compromise with this scale and have a very, very bright silver for some of our weapons. Now this looks super vibrant. That's deliberate because 2 reasons. First off, we're going to hit these with a wash and it's going to knock them down, but we still want them to be noticeable. And the second reason is because we want them on the battlefield to be able to be looked at and see what they are. I want to know this tank's got las cannon and heavy bolters. So it pays to brighten these up just a little bit for the ease of yourself and your opponent when you're playing on the table. And likewise, we would lose if we went full realism on this tank. It would just be grey and black with a company marking with really dark gunmetal weapons. And although it would look cool, I think we're doing a disservice by having these really cool models on the table. So if we want to have a bright point of focus, we'll have it on the little weapons. So that's why I've chosen to go for a really bright silver on all these components. So it's going on the las cannons, the heavy bolters, the 2 heavy bolters at the front, and you can do some on the exhaust stacks at the back if you want to, but I'm going to do those bronze in a bit. I'm leaving spaces there for the weapon casings to be painted black as well. Bronze from Pro-Acryl, lots of Pro-Acryl today. You probably don't guess that I bloody love Pro-Acryl. We're going to paint the top half of the exhaust stacks with these, just because it's how I do pretty much all my vehicles. I like a bronze stack. And we're going to do this across both tanks, and there's a couple of little details we could paint this. There's like this little, I don't know what to call it, it's like a little dome thing by the exhaust vents, the exhaust stacks, but next to a vent. I'm going to paint that bronze as well, just to add a little bit more colour on the top there. Now again, compromise between core models and realism. These will probably be the same colour as the tank, but worn and rusted and corroded on the top and black with all the soot. But we're looking for places to add a bit of colour, and I feel this is a suitable place. Think about the components on the tank that will get changed out the most. It's going to be the weapons, as they're maintained, and probably the bits where the corrosion and muck is the worst, which is going to be the exhaust, the tracks, so on and so forth. Any moving part as well. So this is a good point to add a little bit of colour. There's a big barrel on the left side, you can see by my thumb there. You could probably paint that a different colour if you wanted to. I decided against it because I just didn't want to, simple as that. Iraqi Army Sand, lovely colour from AK. We're going to do this on the lenses that I'm going to paint orange later. So there's a little one at the foot of the tank and then a little one up by the turret. If you're not sure where these are, follow the reference artwork on Warhammer's website and you'll see that these little lenses that they paint blue, but I'm going to paint mine orange. Pick that out a little bit more. These are going to be a nice little spot of colour just to tart them up and make them look a little bit more flashy on the battlefield. As much as we want these tanks to be camouflaged in an urban battlefield so they don't get annihilated by a warlord, we do want a little bit of flash on there. They deserve it. Grey blue, I'm going to use this for the headlamps. So again, check the artwork on Warhammer's website. It's these little bastards here. As soon as I put this on, I thought that's way too bright, I don't like it, but then as it dried and I started filling in the other details, it looked fine, so I left it as it was. Don't be afraid to hold the tank upside down, you can access more of the area that way. There's no point holding the model in one dimension. You have wrists, move them around, makes life easier to paint when you can see more of what you're painting, and you can do that by turning it upside down. That's all we're going to do for these. You can add another highlight in there if you want to, I don't. Griff Hound Orange Contrast, this is going on our lenses, so those bits we painted the sand colour earlier. You don't need a lot, just a little bit, and again it just adds that little kind of menacing glow on there. You can imagine the inside of this tank being red or orange lit as the crew frantically sweat and curse at each other to blast that warlord before it fires back. Coal black to paint the tips of the las cannons and the casings of the heavy bolters. Now you can be as accurate and as finessey as you want with this. I kind of went in quite rough because, again, the distance this tank's going to be, it's not going to make a massive difference. It's just a nice little detail you can choose to do. And I love a black bolter casing, I just think it looks great. While those are drying, we're going to get some Satchel Brown speed paint from Army Painter. I'm going to start the tracks with this. Now, younger Chris was an idiot. He painted all his tracks silver. This is kind of a go-to, especially when I'm starting out in the hobby. I started to become an arrogant bastard about realism on vehicles over the past couple of years, and you don't see tanks with silver tracks because they're the first bit that touches the ground. They get mucky very, very quickly, and in a war zone, nothing's clean. So, safe bet for tracks is paint them brown. Paint them brown, and then you can dry brush or highlight or weather with the colour of the surface that they're rolling on. And again, because these are urban fighting, city warring solar auxilia, I'm going to dry brush them with a bit of grey later on. But while we're waiting for those silvers, bronzes and black casings to dry, this is a good chance for us to paint these tracks with this Satchel Brown. So don't forget the sides of the tracks, any way that you can see basically, whack a bit of this on there. Now obviously be careful not to touch this while you're working. At this point we've had them on a painting handle which conveniently fits directly over the tracks, which is great, but we'll give this plenty of time to dry. Ready for me to dry brush it in a bit. Black wash from Procro, we're going to do this on all the weapons and the metallics we've done, just to A, knock them down a bit, and B, tie it into our weathered armour so it doesn't look like we've got these bright gleaming weapons that are fresh out of the factory, have never fired a shot, and certainly aren't greased and ready to rock. So just a little bit of black wash over all over. It looks like it nulls them down to the umpth degree, but I assure you by the time it's dry, it'll look exactly as we want it to. Again, we don't want them to be pearlescent, but we want to be able to recognise them during our games to see what this tank's loaded out with. And again, any metallic details, the stacks on the back, we are going to whack some of this over. Beautiful battery, beautiful. Right, once they're dry, we're going to get some neutral grey from Pro-Acryl. I'm going to do, again, back to the lightest dry brush in the world, just over those treads. It's going to tie them into the narrative of them fighting in a city by looking like dust and crap settled on the edges. And it's also going to break it up so we don't just have these brown tracks. I'm going to be light and gentle with this. I initially started applying weathering powders to my Legions Imperialis tank tracks, and although it looks great, again, I go back to, does it fit the scale? I don't think you'll be able to pick up dusty tracks to that degree at this scale, so we're going to try this first. If I don't like it, I can always add powders later on, and if I don't like it when the powders are on, I can always take them off with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. So again, little tickles on any areas of the tracks we can see. If you don't know how to do your tracks, check out any reference material. Wikipedia's got Tank Encyclopedia, which is absolutely brilliant on there. But if you ever need real world inspiration, just when you're sat at a set of traffic lights, look at the wheel arches of a van you're pulled up next to you. That's where I get 99% of my weathering references from. Lots of browns, oranges, greys, and no shine whatsoever. So again, borrow from real world inspiration and compromise on what's going to look cool. Also keep in mind you want this to match the basing of your infantry and your walkers and stuff for your army, so however you can tie that in, go mad. But once we've done that, guys, we have finished our Shadow Sword tanks. 10 out of 10 will Volcano Cannon again. My only grievance is that you need 3 of these to run the formation in the box, so you've got to buy another box, which is, you know, capitalism run rampant. But thank you very much for watching this video. I adored painting these. I can't wait to get my Solar Auxilia for Legions sorted. It's going to look absolutely wicked. If you enjoyed this, leave a comment. If you'd like to see more Legions Imperialis, let me know what you'd like to see. Thank you very much for subscribing to my Patreon. It genuinely means the world to me. It lets me be able to do what I want to do and create content and hopefully inspire you guys to get some mad hobby done. Don't be afraid to let me know if you want to see something different, if you've got ideas. I am branching out into gaming content as soon as I feasibly can, so watch this space. Otherwise, take care, roll well, paint tiny tanks, keep kicking ass, and I'll catch you on the flippy dip. Peace!